You're listening to
The Real King
with Joe and Heidi King. Hey everyone, we knew we would get into some tough subject matter, and for that reason, we just want to add a quick disclaimer on this episode. While we don't talk explicitly, we do make reference to sexual assault in this episode, and we wanted to let you know in case you wanted to listen at a time when you are not with a younger audience. All right, get ready everybody, because on today's episode we are going to be getting raw and real, and we are going to dig in and hear Joe's testimony.
Just leave and go, and you follow him.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that were sent out that came back to Christ, and they're like, well, even the demons, we have power over them, and Jesus was like, don't revel in that. You know, that's I saw Satan fall like lightning. He was letting them know that it was worth more that their salvation was set, that their name was written in the Lamb's Book of Life, than to have all the authority over all the power in the earth.
Yeah.
What credentials do you have to be able to bring this message? The testimony.
Yeah.
In Revelations, it says you overcome by the word of your testimony and by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. I've been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Yeah. Now, I study more than most people. I know people that graduated from Bible schools that have barely picked up a Bible since they graduated. And they're on staff somewhere, and they have to spend 55 hours a week on salary to think of 45 minutes worth of something to say. I'm in 250 plus houses a year. I've been in probably well over 50 practicing witches' houses, some of which are professors at our universities, and educated people that are practicing daily. They're always reading something. They're always applying these things to their life, and I can boldly go before the throne of God and receive His protection, His mercy and grace, and go into these places and have conversation. I can witness to these people. I can. A lot of these people are never going to drive themselves to a church to hear me speak.
So you were talking before last episode about how you have to like continue to refine and renew your testimony basically every day, right?
Yeah.
It's new every single day. And I think one of the big misconceptions that people have about walking with Christ is that it doesn't take any work.
No.
But it's like the biggest lie.
It's a huge...
And
Absolutely.
you have to equip the saints in the same way that you would equip an Olympic track runner, an Olympic swimmer, any profession, skill, trade, where it takes practice, and you have to learn it and refine it, and you work on it every single day, and if you don't, you lose it. And I think people that's such a miss nowadays, where people, it's like they want to show up on Sunday morning, they want to get their cup filled, and then they walk out the door and that's it, but they're not equipped for anything.
Right.
So when they're faced with adversity,
Right.
and complications in life, because you're gonna have them.
When I was saved on July 11th, 2009, when I was saved, but every day I'm being saved until I get to the bema, the judgment seat of Christ. So every day, Scripture says we work out our own salvation. Every day, I'm still being saved. I was saved that day. I was delivered that day. But every day, I'm still working out that deliverance. Every day there's going to be, each day has some sort of temptation or evil of its own.
And the deliverance really was a stepping stone.
Oh, absolutely.
Because from that point on, you flourish in every other area.
There was specific hard things that I was delivered from that day that were big things, big issues. Like big enough where my spouse barely talked to me from that next day on for months because she was afraid that interaction, where there was no booze or drugs or anything in the house, might somehow give some sort of, I guess, a feeling of
Like trigger
self.
you?
No, like self. Like oh, you've got some sort of self-control. You've quit for a month, and then there would be like a fall off the wagon or a relapse,
Yeah.
right?
Did you feel that way? Did
Oh, I
you
was
feel
waiting
like you
for the
were-
foot to drop.
Yeah, she didn't
shoe.
realize the spiritual aspect. Like,
Because he had tried before.
it
Not
was always
really.
like a day or
Yeah.
something like that, and then it was like, this isn't no.
Or-
putting up with people without liquid courage is not.
Yeah.
Well, when I say tried before, it was like, it wasn't like a complete abstinence, but maybe like, I'm not going to drink hard liquor anymore. I'm just going to stick to beer for a while. Like that sort of thing, maybe.
We also were in such a horrible relationship at that point, though, where we didn't like each other. Mm-hmm. Like, we weren't friends.
Right.
So I knew that if I would say anything, I was waiting for the foot to drop,
Shoe
and
to
then I
drop.
knew if
The shoe.
the shoe to drop, and I knew that if I would say anything to him about what happened,
You'd upset the
that
apple
he would
cart.
absolutely go into a rebellion and go right back to it. Like,
Which wasn't.
but that's how the devil works, though. So he still kept, like, a lot of the people would hear, oh, you got delivered from alcoholism. How amazing is that for you and your family? Like, did you guys, like, go out for brunch after? And, like, in reality, he got delivered from alcoholism, and we didn't actually speak of it, nor did our relationship get better for probably 30 days after that.
I got asked to share my testimony in a large Assemblies of God church in front of like 300 and some people, which was crazy traumatic for me because I've never been one to cry. And as soon as I stepped up onto that pulpit, I bawled.
Which
Like,
was the Holy Spirit.
Sobbed uncontrollably. And the pastor was literally trying to translate. Like he was interpreting through the tears. And it was this whole mess. And that was the first time my in-laws, who all happened to be there because this was a service right before a holiday.
And myself, was the first time that I heard what happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'd been sneaking to church, and that's how I got so close with pastor and
That's
stuff.
so funny. Sneaking to church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
when I went to church, like it wasn't even like an issue.
when you come from 3 generations of tent revival ministry and your parents were used by God to literally raise the dead,
Right.
you have some pride issues even after the deliverance. So that brings it right back to what you said. There was specific things that were taken that were huge issues that day that we had to, like, even the shock of that was so much to our systems that, like, okay, this is every day for years, and now all of a sudden that's gone. If you smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day for 20 years, and now all of a sudden today you don't smoke anymore, there's hours of your day that were usually spent trying to find your pack of cigarettes and your lighter and you're enjoying your whatever, your addiction to your nicotine or whatever. Now that time is no longer consumed with that activity.
Yeah, you would jump from gas station to gas station to gas station on the way to a Walmart just to buy booze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after the deliverance, when he had to go to Walmart, there wasn't 5 gas station stops that he had to take anymore.
I didn't know how to walk through Walmart sober, if that makes any sense.
Do you know what stuck out to me about you saying you snuck to church is like how many people experience a similar situation or maybe a slightly different flavor of it, right? And they get delivered and they slink back to church because of the lies of the enemy that you should be coming back with like shame or timidity And really, it should be a prodigal son
Absolutely.
experience
It
where
should.
you spot Jesus in the distance and you start booking it towards one another, and like two people running towards each other on a beach, and it's a reunion that is glorious.
The crazy thing for me was when I started doing that, and then I reached out to the man that spoke at that church the day I got delivered. He literally was like, "Oh, neat." Like
That was his
we
reaction.
actually, it's been almost 14 years. We literally just sat and I shared a bunch of the testimony with him because he never heard the whole thing because we never had that much time. We were always working. And he was like, "Oh my gosh." Like I had no idea.
Oh, because he worked in ministry.
Yeah.
And you volunteered.
Yeah, and the first time I talked to him, I was like, "I don't know what to do." And you spoke the day that God delivered me, so maybe I'm supposed to. And
You
he was
never
like,
know the impact you're having.
No.
"Oh," and he was like, "Oh, neat," and he just kind of like shrugged it off. It was like 3 weeks later, he somehow tracked me down and was like, "I think you're supposed to serve in this ministry with me because you haven't left my mind since that day." In the meantime, in that like 3 weeks, the only people that approached me in that church were, I don't know how to describe them. They're good Christian people, but they lent their ear to the wrong voice. So their approach was, "Do you golf? Do you?"
Do you have a boat?
Yeah.
Oh, they were trying to find common ground.
Yeah.
Well, and it wasn't like but the delivery was kind of like a, nose up in the air, like,
Oh,
okay, you don't look like us, you don't walk and talk like us, you're
They're
obviously
trying to figure you out.
yeah. And that was such a huge turnoff for me because I had such bad experiences in church, especially being a pastor's kid. You're always held to a standard that nobody in the church is going to meet. And somehow they think because you ride in the back seat of your pastor parents' car to church that you're somehow gonna end up walking on water.
Yeah.
It's not how it works.
And what they don't know is that most pastors' kids are attacked harder by spiritual things because they know their destiny.
Well, and if you ever like just read the Bible, you find out really quick that a person has to have eyes to see and ears to hear. And just because your parents are, we talked about that in the last podcast with Samson. Just because his parents did everything right didn't mean he wasn't going to go out and end up in trouble. And he spent 19 years of his life with the Philistines.
The kids have to work out their own salvation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to experience it yourself.
And because of those experiences that I had, that was like the worst approach for me, but it was the only people in that body that approached me. And I had something well up on the inside of me that was like, literally, you the flight or fight, that kicks in, and like, my flesh was like, "Oh God, it's more of these broken, needy people that are always edifying themselves by looking at the less or the lack in others." We actually, when I got delivered and set free, I had made pretty good money. I did very well. I'm a very animated guy, and I've always been one that's social. So I did well in business and was an asset to every company I worked with. But I lived well above my means. If I was at a tavern, I'm pretty sure I was buying rounds with money I didn't have. I mean, there was like payday loans, pawn shop tickets, car title loans, all these things. And we made a lot of money. And we were losing everything. And in the midst of all this, shortly up to the deliverance, I lost my job. I lost everything. We lost our place to live. I mean, we were
You were
literally
broken down in order to be built back up.
yeah, we were losing everything. We weren't talking because we didn't have that kind of relationship anymore. And I was navigating some uncharted waters too in that moment. That was like really crazy for me. When I got delivered at that moment, it was pretty amazing. Had some cool stuff happen with my health, with my physical body. But within weeks of that, the enemy, the devil, was hitting me in my dream life. Mm-hmm. Like, I would go to sleep and I would have such realistic dreams about consuming drugs and alcohol that I would have to wake up before my wife and go out and check the cars to make sure there wasn't cases of alcohol in there.
Like after
the
deliverance. And like, I didn't have the tools like we said earlier, bringing fleshly weapons to a spiritual battle. I didn't have the tools to fight that. And right? I didn't have people around me that worked in deliverance ministry. So none of them were equipped. And now I've found most of the people that I meet that have a quote unquote deliverance ministry, mm-hmm. they have this idea, one and done, mm-hmm. like, ooh, we'll jump the bloodline, we'll do this. God has shown me such deep things with deliverance where that's not how it works. Jesus said those things get driven out of a man. They go and they find a deserted, dry place. They find no comfort, and they come back to find a clean and swept house because they want abode there. Mm-hmm. And if they find it, they bring in 7 spirits stronger than themselves. You get rid of an addiction or a dependency on some sort of pharmakia like alcohol, and now this thing comes back in, and it's mm-hmm. got some sort of pornographic issue with it. It's got some sort of anger issue with mm-hmm. it. It's
Lust.
Got a buddy of suicide.
Right.
You know, like these things that we have to be in the church. This edified. Paul said it best. He said, "We're not to take part in unfruitful speech. We're not to be taking part in civilian lifestyle."
Right.
How many police officers? I mean, I've known police officers that literally live in a different community than the one they work in because they know they can't interact at the grocery store with the civilians because they'll lose their respect for their authority behind the badge that they carry. You know, so it's like learning all this stuff in the process of being delivered, you know? So now I understand.
You mentioned not being around people that have worked in deliverance, and I want to add a point of clarification that your addiction had created distance between you and the people that could have supported you maybe or had experience in certain aspects, right?
Yeah.
But your experience was also unique unto itself.
Yeah.
But we were raised around deliverance ministries, but you were distant from that at that point, right? And alcohol didn't only harm your relationship with Heidi, it harmed your relationship with everyone. Yeah. And so you were isolated. You were like perfect for the kill, right? Because you were off by yourself.
Yeah.
And I was always in some sort of survival mode too.
Right. And it was very literally God going after the one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was like, I get asked when we speak or whatever, you know, there's a lot of people come up like, oh, you know, my cousin or my son or my sister's boy or whatever, mm-hmm. you know, do you think God will do this for them? Like, absolutely. Like, everywhere mm-hmm. Jesus went, there was deliverance. Everywhere. Mm-hmm. Everyone he prayed for, he cast something out, you know, and absolutely the biggest takeaway I have though is if you receive deliverance, you have to steward that. Mm-hmm. That's not just for you,
right?
Because what good are you to walk in a testimony that's so great mm-hmm. of being born again and having your life given back to you, and then not share it with others.
Right.
So if there's still shame attached after the deliverance, then you're not delivered. You're just you're free from one thing, but you've just
Picked up another.
well, you've just come into covenant with shame. Oh, I can't let anybody know that I had dirty magazines in the closet. You know what I mean? You're not that great of a representation to these people anyway. No matter how awesome you think you are, you are nothing until Christ shines through you. And the way he shines through you is he takes every room in the house. Reinhard Bonnke used to tell this amazing story about God being invited in, but only to a room.
Right.
You know, and he couldn't protect the guy because the guy would only give him one room. And he said, Lord, I can't let you in that room because there's things in there I wouldn't want you to see.
I have a hot take on that.
Yeah.
And I feel like, by and large, the people that will make you feel dirty and shameful, that is really, and they act so aghast at the fact that you would mention these things. Like, ooh, how dare you? They don't want their own found out.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it is.
Uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
They don't want their dirty little secrets exposed. But exposing all of this, and we've talked about this at length, exposing the unsavory and these tough topics, you have to talk about it. And people should rejoice with you.
Yeah.
At the thought that, at the notion that you've been set free from the things. And it should be a happy discussion and a joyful occasion to discuss those things and freedom from those things. And if anybody makes somebody feel differently and attaches shame or hushes them, that is a red flag.
Well, the spiritual strength of shame tells you that when darkness is exposed, you should feel uncomfortable. The Spirit of God, the blood of Jesus, when it comes and exposes darkness, then that darkness should feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
And you should feel
Precisely.
free, because
It's
where the Spirit
flip-flopped.
of the Lord is, there is freedom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. If you don't expose the
And
darkness,
joy.
it's not ever going to go
and
away.
strength.
The fruits. Yeah.
Oh man, it's mind-blowing to me that we have people, when I talk about certain situations when I was real young, it happens more often than it ever should to children and in families where there's like, there's always a creepy family member or somebody that does something to children that they shouldn't do. And, a lot of times it goes undetected, or it's too uncomfortable to approach. So people just go, we'll keep the kids away from them. And myself and my two brothers were, we had something like that happen. We were little in the church. The church was doing amazing things. Like it was great. There was all kinds of stuff going on that was amazing. And people had such discernment for the good, because they were discipling people, and they seen the gifts in them, and they were edifying them, that there's probably a few different things that kind of added to the recipe. One, it was a female, so who suspects, in the 80s,
Right.
a woman to affect a bunch of little boys. This kid is now affected the rest of his life with something that he can't share with anybody because of pride, for one, and two, his trust has been broken.
Right.
How do you have a good relationship with a God that you can't physically see? You trust him. Trust in the Lord with what? All your heart. And now your trust is broken as like a 6-year-old?
Right.
And now you gotta navigate life like that. So I spent my life from like 6 years old on until I was delivered from all these things that I used as coping mechanisms, self-medicating, and I was in survival mode all the time. So
So do you feel like you were in survival mode since you were 6?
oh yeah, Absolutely.
And then that is what was the gateway for the alcohol?
Absolutely. There was so many things that were always going on where, one, you take on a responsibility at that age where you think, we had a big church. If that would have got exposed.
And close knit too.
Yeah, and everybody knew each other.
Yeah, it was I'm sure looking back, it was probably unfathomable that something like that could happen right amongst all of the good things that were happening at that time. And so it's one of those things. There's so many contributing factors, like you said. And a lot of times it's hurt people that hurt other people that had been abused.
I can tell you this. By the time I was 9, because of my acting out, I was literally, my grandparents were the senior pastors of that church. Everybody knew that I was already a little space case ADD. I had too much attention. I was always into something, that I became outcasted within my own family, within the church. So the closest
Extended
people,
family.
the closest people to me in that situation was that offender. By the time you're 9, your little brain gets thinking that you're consenting to things. I have a 9-year-old daughter right now.
Yeah.
That kid can't consent to anything.
That's
when I look
part
at
of the
her
problem in our culture right now. Yeah.
When I look at her, if I was to see a 20-something-year-old getting her to consent to anything, I'd be in a prison ministry from the inside.
From the inside.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not that guy.
Yeah. Well, they're so innocent. She even said a word that was somewhat inappropriate the other day, and she didn't know
idea.
it.
Yeah.
And there was just such an innocence on her face.
Yeah. So it's like you have this responsibility at that young age where if this gets exposed, mom and dad will lose their ministry, and grandpa and grandma will lose their ministry, and all these people will have to leave. So it's literally...
it's crazy because that weight that you bared as a child, a very young child, it just continued to get stronger with what you're going to take in to try to relieve any of that pain that was so deep inside of you, right? So then other people would come along and not know any of your past and be, for me, for example, and be like, why can't he just stop drinking?
Right.
Why doesn't he have any self-control? Just figure it out.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, because it was so much deeper than just party time.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the people that struggle with needing deliverance, and a lot of people in their lives that don't understand why deliverance is not taking place, it's because there is a deep-rooted issue that is not being addressed yet.
Unresolved. Yeah.
And maybe those people around the person that needs the deliverance, maybe they don't even know what that deep-rooted issue is. But
it gives you compassion towards that person in a different way.
Because I didn't know these things when I was dealing with the alcoholic husband. Would it have changed my outlook? Would it have changed the way I pray? Probably.
I was serving God in ministry for 5 years, delivered from all these wonderful, crazy things, and my brother died, 39 years old. And at the point that he died, that's when God exposed the other issues with the survival mode and all this stuff from this traumatic thing that happened. And all of a sudden I had to come face to face with that. I actually got to come face to face with the offender and forgive them. And that's a whole story in itself. But what happened was God started showing me a side of deliverance that most people don't know because they've not lived it. You know, that deliverance from that shame and that offense on such a young child, that's a really powerful thing to understand. The idea, you know, people have this idea like, oh, I'll never pray against this or that, or I'll never well, I don't want to be involved in deliverance or casting out devils or anything, because what if it comes after you? What if a spirit jumps? Baloney.
Yeah, that's a lie.
Well,
That's people that believe
absolutely
we serve a
fallacy.
little God and the devil is a big, big devil.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that
that's
is a
garbage.
lie. Greater is he that's in me.
Well, and the crazy thing is you've been being watched since birth. Mm-hmm. Principalities, powers, spiritual wickedness in heavenly realms. You don't battle against flesh and blood.
Right.
So just like the Levitical priesthood had an absolute calling on their life to carry the ark, whatever ministry God has, he called you since before you were in your mother's womb, right? So whatever that is put on your bloodline that you're supposed to steward, those principalities and powers, those things that are geographically set to keep you from advancing in the kingdom of heaven, are always keeping watch. And when they see an opportunity to keep you from sliding into the potential to be the next Reinhard Bonnke, the next Billy Graham, the next person that's going to reach multitudes, they start to set snares. Mm-hmm. Psalm says God revealed the snare of the fowler. That little box with the piece of cheese under it, where you go to reach for that, innocently reach for that piece of cheese, and now you're captive. Now you're a prisoner. So the idea that here's this kid that is the lineage of 3 generations of ministry, like people that had effective ministries. My grandfather had a Bible school. He wrote tons of books. He came from very adverse situations. His parents were in addiction. They were not good people. His brother spent his entire life in penitentiaries. Fathered many children without ever really being around. My grandmother, I mean, she had an amazing inner healing ministry. She was always working in the ministry of deliverance. My parents, my dad broke off things and ended bloodline curses and garbage that was put into the bloodline when he got saved in 1980. Like, I come from a lot of amazing people that God used and lifted up, like people that you wouldn't think were credible sources. And God's allowed them to walk in his divine nature and power. And then, boom, they have a kid who now has this personality that's like through the roof. You know, I was always a busy kid, and I was always like happy and fun and always social. There's a big threat. If that kid gets to a place where he trusts God from the age of accountability on, you know, that's world-changing stuff right there. So to knock them out, and then you have all the focus, you know, it's like the story when Jesus was coming across the lake and the storm rose up and they came down and found him sleeping in the bow of the ship, and they're like, Lord, you're just going to let us die. Like, what are you doing? And he comes up and he says, peace, be still. And then he lands on the shore, and the possessed men come out of the tombs. And those spirits speak out and they say, you know, Son of Man, why are you here? Our time has not yet come. The idea that these things know the answer is coming before the town's people knew. Mm-hmm. Those people that did not value the possessed man. They put him, outcast him in the outsides of the town because he was inconvenient to deal with.
That's the true definition of a marginalized community right there.
Well, and it's inconvenient to deal with that.
Right, yeah.
But Christ found worth in that, you know? So it's like these things, we battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, spiritual wickedness in heavenly realms. If you think you're going to go through life and you're going to avoid spiritual wickedness and any kind of spiritual battle, and you're just going to float through, you're going to be ineffective for the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
The only thing you're going to gain out of it is maybe your own salvation, but you're going to become a different type of captive or prisoner. Mm-hmm. Because it's going to start small with like, I don't really like being in Walmart anymore. I'm going to shop at Target. different class of people. Then you're going to find yourself in Target, uncomfortable there. Pretty soon you're going to find a smaller store. Maybe you're going to shop at Aldi because it's only got 3 aisles. Pretty soon you're just ordering your groceries because you just don't want to deal with people at all anymore.
Wow. I
And
feel
now all of a
called
sudden,
out.
now all of a sudden you're confined. You still lead worship at church. You're
I do.
okay.
I'm all right.
But now you're going to find yourself confined to your home. Mm-hmm. So now you went from like avoiding conflict in spiritual warfare to literally the warfare is in your own home, and now you're tormented and attacked in your own bed when you're trying to sleep at night, and you can't go anywhere for help because you stopped attending church because you wanted to be the church outside the 4 walls. Mm-hmm. It's false doctrine. It's poor doctrine, and we are supposed to be able to
because
resist.
it's a trick, right? To,
Right.
again, separate you out from amongst other believers so that you're easier to capture.
It's
I
as
mean,
re-
anybody
And you're
that's watched a nature documentary knows that that's how a lion or a tiger separates out one gazelle or one wildebeest, and that's when they make their kill. Mm-hmm. Every single time.
Yeah. And you still need to be that believer and spreading the gospel outside of those 4
Yes.
walls. But you
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
need to have your butt in church every
Yeah.
Sunday.
Iron sharpens
and
iron.
every Bible study. And not because the church is forcing you to.
If you leave all the knives in the drawer, they don't sharpen each other. You got to take them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Iron sharpens iron. You got to get them to a place it's not comfortable.
Well, if you're the average of the company that you keep and you spend 6 days a week hanging out with your friends that go to the bar and smoke cigarettes and watch smut on TV, and that's what you're doing 6 days a week, and then for 30 minutes or an hour on a Sunday, you're trying to get as much God as you can because you just drug yourself in there because of guilt and shame.
It's interesting because it is so much easier for people right now in society, in our culture, to subscribe to the idea of garbage in, garbage out when it comes to your physical body.
Oh, yeah.
You know dang well if
Yep.
you go to the gym once per week, you will not see any sort of gains. You're not going to come out with a 6-pack going
Yep.
to the gym 1 day a week.
Yep.
That's a joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And it is so much easier for people to grasp the concept of, I need to eat right, garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
I need a moment on the lips is a lifetime on the hips, or whatever the saying is. That is so much easier for people to grasp on their physical body, but they can't grasp that spiritually.
If
Yeah.
you treated your spiritual life like you were an athlete,
Yeah.
and there's even scripture that talks
or
about
even just like standard maintenance, being able to run the mile, like we did when we were younger.
yeah. They spend 30 minutes in church a week and then they wonder
What's your spiritual fitness?
what's wrong.
Well, and we're called to pick up our cross and follow Him. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us, our cross is our flesh. Paul had a thorn in his side.
Right.
So it's like, how do we have to understand that there's so much to being a Christian. It's not just about repeating a prayer and having the helmet of salvation.
Thank you for joining us today for this episode and inviting us to sow into your life. We pray that you were blessed by what we shared. We would be so honored if you would subscribe. That way, you will be notified every time we post a new episode. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You can find us by searching at The Real King Podcast. That's at THE Real King Podcast. See you next time.